This is the Michael Brighton Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and I'm here with Derek Duchesne, who is the CEO of Better You, which helps transform lives using psychedelic therapy. So, Derek, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm so grateful to be here.
So, for those that have honestly no idea what psychedelics are, how can they help? Break it down for those that are interested.
Yeah, so psychedelics is a loose term, but the definition behind psychedelic is a window to the soul. And so there's different kinds of things that can kind of give us a psychedelic experience. And in our case, what we work with in particular is psychedelic medicine. And for many years, these types of medicine, for thousands of years, they've been used globally as medicine. In the United States and the 60s, they became banned, which then globally followed suit. But they were used in the United States as medicine pretty heavily in the 50s and 60s. But this could include a lot of things, different types of substances, hundreds of different types of substances, such as ketamine, LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, and ibogaine, and all kinds of different substances that kind of alter our perspective or our altered states of consciousness with our uh, relationship with ourselves and the way that we see the outside world.
That makes me think when you say psychedelic medicine, it's making me think mental health and treating those kinds of things. How do they do that in a way that traditional medicine can't necessarily do that?
That's an excellent question, Michael. So, in the 50s and 60s, uh, things like LSD and MDMA were being heavily researched and used at places like Stanford and then started there and kind of went across the country for things like depression and anxiety and PTSD. And the way that there was a tremendous success prior to the war on drugs, but the way that it works, kind of a different, and then it's that's kind of a very broad statement because they all work, they all do very different things. A lot of them kind of end up at the same goal, but they do very different things and treat very different things. There's not like this psychedelic can help treat a multitude of things very effectively. A lot of them are really effective for one or two things like depression or anxiety or a handful of things, but incredibly effective at one. And where one may be too powerful or too different, they can be really bad for treating something else. So if you're looking like at a broad scope, like say depression, the way that we've been treating depression and anxiety in the United States really hasn't changed in the last 100 years, and it's very archaic, right? It's based off of Freudian and Rockefeller methods where you diagnose the illness and treat the symptom, but not actually designed for us to heal. And and the serotonin hypothesis, right, which like 1 in 10 people in the United States is on an SSRI or antidepressant, and all of the antidepressant, that theory is based off of the serotonin hypothesis, which has been debunked in recent years that that's not where our depression stems from. So you have all these people that are continuing to be medicated on things that are very can be very harmful for them, and with a very low success rate. And what psychedelics do is instead of our traditional treatments where we're just treating the symptoms and then just keep taking different medications to treat the symptoms, what this allows us to do a lot of the times is take that journey inward, and instead of putting a band-aid on it or covering it up or masking, numbing us down so we don't feel sad, or numbing us down so we don't feel anxious, or covering it up and sedating us, it allows us to dive deep and process these core issues, or at least face them and give us the ability to address them, and things that we were holding on to deep inside of us that maybe we didn't know we were holding on to, or stuff that maybe haunts us day in and day out, and really affects like how we show up in the world, and affects who we are as people, and our ability to function. So there's a multitude of different things, but if you look at like MDMA, for example, MDMA, it's now in phase three clinical trials, or sorry, going into phase three clinical trials with the FDA for treatment of PTSD, and the stats on it are tremendous for especially for veterans that are coming back, that are having very strong cases of PTSD that aren't really functioning. And the stats something like 7 out of 10 of them, after going through this program and these treatments, would no longer be considered diagnosed with PTSD afterwards. So the
Wow.
stats are remarkable. And in my case, ketamine therapy, which I didn't even know it's technically a pseudo psychedelic. But for me, like when I was going through the darkest uh, period of my life, and I've always been a very happy person and humble, like grew up with nothing, and always saw the opportunity and excitement and beauty of life, and never thought that suicide or depression would become my life, or a part of it. And when it did, somebody had recommended, when I had reach my lowest point, they said, like, I'm going to take you somewhere. It's going to help. And they told me it was a ketamine clinic. And I was, first thing that popped through my head was, that's stupid. That's a horse tranquilizer. I'm not,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, why? Like, like, and other people recommended take mushrooms. I was trying different things that my doctors told me. I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do to feel better. And it was just getting worse. And uh, yeah, I never thought that I would say, ketamine therapy saved my life, but it's I'm so grateful that my friend dragged me into that clinic that day, a few years back, because if he didn't, I probably wouldn't be here. And what it did for me, and now why we started Better You, is that when you go through this, dark cycles of depression, where your negative thoughts just become consuming you, and these repetitive stories that we tell ourselves every day, like, and just the basic things of getting out of bed or brushing your teeth, they seem like the most impossible, or like the most challenging task to start the day. And everything takes so much energy to accomplish the smallest things. I wasn't really eating, I wasn't showering, I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't responding to anybody, I just kept getting deeper in this hole, and telling myself every day that I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of living, the world would be better off without me. And when you start going down those cycles, and they get worse and worse, you really start to believe these things. And like, nobody takes their own life because they're thinking clearly, right? Their brain is sick. And when you go down the traditional paths, and nothing's helping you, and you start to think that nothing can help you, and nothing will help you, and you lose hope. And when you get to that point, like, in my opinion, I after my session, I was floored. I was blown away. I thought, how is there the cure for suicide, and nobody knows about it? Nobody's talking about it. Because I went into that clinic, hours before, the night before, you about to end my own life. And my friend that came over when I was at my lowest point, uh, that saved me and brought me into this clinic the next morning. It was the first time in a long time that I felt this connection to myself, and this connection to the outside world. It felt like it was an immediate separation from these thoughts that I was drowning myself in, and from ruminating over things that had happened in the past year, that was really really challenging, and it allowed me to separate from those things and look at it from a different perspective and understand that these thoughts in my head or these things that happened were exactly that. They're just thoughts and they're just things, and create that separation. They don't define who I am. And feeling this sense of, yeah, this connection to myself and the outside world made, like, almost immediately, in the following days, or as I felt like I didn't even recognize the person that I was going into that session, or the fact that things had gotten so bad. So that's yeah, I'm not sure if that answered the question correctly, but that was my experience with the medicine early, with a form of the medicine early on, uh, which led me to this. Wasn't looking at it and how to help other people, or professionally at the time, because I was still afraid to talk about it. And I saw my darkness and my journey as a weakness, and that I never thought that I would get to that point. And I didn't understand it, like when you hear about somebody that takes their life, or you watch the news story on TV, and my thought was always, how could they, or this person was so successful and so loved, how and I didn't understand it. And hearing all the things that people say, like, this is selfish, or that was a drug overdose, or they should have done X, Y, and Z. Like, we don't know. Nobody knows what anybody's really going through. And then the pandemic hit, right? And I realized that, now there's so many people that their lives are shifting very quickly and very rapidly, and people are losing, their families, their homes, their careers. And it's a very challenging time for the world. And it's like, how there's got to be a way that other people, like, how can we save people from making that final and irreversible decision, and help them feel connected to themselves and the world and that love again. And that's what led us to, yeah, to where we are today.
Wow. Well, Derek, thanks so much for sharing that. I appreciate you getting all person with us there. Can't kind of been too easy to share. And there were loads of talk about things like talk therapy, psychedelics, in my view anyway, just based on this conversation, is there's elements of you're going to experience the thing because the substance or drug in air quotes is getting you there, where you could do talk therapy and you may or may not experience it based on your openness, your honesty, your willingness to go through the process. Am I right in saying that, or do you think that there's a bit more to it?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I'm not knocking talk therapy at all. I think everybody should talk to someone, and that's not a friend or family member that you can unload and get things off, and try to get perspective on. There's also the other side of it, where, like, I was in therapy when I prior to really becoming suicidal, and while I was there, right? I have now worked with, a lot of people, thousands of people that all come from going through, going to regular therapy sessions, talk therapy, and they all have treating psychiatrists as well, and not all of them, but most of them. And so they've been on different types of SSRIs, or antidepressants, or benzos, or et cetera, et cetera. And they're going through talk therapy, but our brains are very efficient machines, right? We go from point A to point B, and once we create these thought patterns, as time goes on, we get deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And the more that we think about something, the more we ruminate it. And this is works for us in a good way and in a bad way, right? But when it starts working against us, is when it becomes harder and harder for us to break out of these dark and repetitive thought cycles, or anxious thought cycles, or stressful thought cycles. And what psychedelics can do, and ketamine therapy in particular, is it allows us to immediately break out of our default mode network, which is kind of our operating system that's imprinted, and kind of we settle into it in our late adolescence, but in the way that we show up in the world, our triggers, the way that we react to things and respond to things, and over time, it just becomes our default operating system. And as we age, you'll always hear somebody referring to their sibling or their parents or their grandparents, and somebody's just so stuck in their ways and they can't see out of it or see things in a different perspective. And that's, a lot of times it's not their fault. It's just the way our brain works. And with certain types of psychedelic medicine, and done under the guidance, I always recommend with a structured program or the guidance of a professional, because these mind, things that can put you into a altered state of consciousness can they can be as traumatic as they can be therapeutic if not done properly. And it allows us to, like, so many of our patients say that one session was equivalent to 5 years of talk therapy, or X amount of time. They say, I have been going and talking to somebody for so long, and I just haven't been able to get through this, or I keep ruminating on these same things, and I can't change my kind of perspective on it. And with a couple of sessions with ketamine therapy, immediately they can have those kind of breakthrough or aha moments or epiphanies, and be able to look at something without that normal emotional charge.
You ever find that it's like this is the last straw here? Like, I've tried therapy, I've tried this, I've tried, some of the endorphins exercise might bring to help push things over the edge a little. But do you think that psychedelics is like people only go to it if they have to? Or do you think there are people out there that will do it, like whether it's microdosing or anything like that, just to help take the edge off and help things get a little bit easier?
So, Michael, that's an excellent question, because things have changed dramatically, especially in the United States in the last few years, especially since we started this. For me, it was a last stop. There's a derivative S-ketamine, which is called Spravato. It's a Johnson and Johnson pharmaceutical version of ketamine therapy, and that has to be done, in office. It can only be prescribed if the patient has failed two or more traditional antidepressants, and there's all these other hoops that you have to go through for that particular treatment. And in a lot of times, I wish, and yeah, and a lot of the, like, insurance benefits companies or employee benefits companies that I'd spoken to, a few years ago, they would show me the data that they have, and that is that they would spend X amount of dollars on employees going through years of different antidepressants and different therapies, and then they would pay for a round of ketamine treatments, whether it was in office or an at-home virtually guided treatment. And they would see after that, instead of monthly medications or a daily pill or weekly therapy sessions, that they would go through a month or two of these treatments, like once or twice a week. And then after that, for most of those people, that they wouldn't see, maybe 6 months later, 8 months later, that they would come back, in to do another round, or say once a week or once every couple of weeks, as kind of a booster maintenance thing. But they saw that they were saving a tremendous amount of money on their employees by giving them ketamine therapy, but it was as a last resort, right? So then they approached us because they wanted to make that a first resort when people are struggling with depression and anxiety. So it's an excellent question, Michael, and the amount of people that the media has done a tremendous job, right, educating people about the benefits of psychedelic medicine and psychedelic therapy. And given the global status of things with the COVID, and then war, and now we're going into possibly another major, or two major wars, and the status of everybody's collective consciousness and mental health is at a very interesting inflection point. And you see people, if you hear about, there's countless shows on Netflix and on and documentaries, and if you turn on any episodic or crime show or anything or HBO, you're just going to see shows where they're referring to psychedelics as medicine and psychedelic therapy, and or Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. So that the media has done a tremendous job on re-educating people about the benefits of these things, because for the last 60, 50 years, we've been told that these are all things that will kill you and there's no medicinal value to them and they will ruin your life and ruin your brain, when for a lot of these things, it's the exact opposite. Uh, so we're seeing microdosing has for psilocybin, it's become a tremendous trend, and definitely has its benefits for increasing neuroplasticity and new neural pathways. But my theory, I think somebody wants to try that as an alternative to SSRIs, all for it. It's still illegal. It's still, there's when you have something that's illegal, it's the supply chain is challenging, and not knowing if there's something's going to be consistent, or be able to get it regularly in a safe manner. So that's a challenge. The other part of like if you're looking at uh, psilocybin or microdosing, it's you're still putting software on a damaged computer if you're taking it for particularly depression. And what ketamine therapy does, it allows you to achieve that. It's like a control alt delete. So it kind of or it's defragging the hard drive. It kind of wipes the years or buildup of chronic like chronic stress and negative thought patterns, and being able to kind of wipe it clean and then supplementing it with something on top of it can, where I think we've seen the most success. The preventative or spiritual exploration, or like we're seeing more of that, unfortunately. So ketamine therapy is legal in all 50 states, right? Under a clinical supervision or a doctor's prescription. The challenge with that is that you have to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety or PTSD to be prescribed. There's also like at pain clinics in person, they also prescribe IV ketamine in person. But people come to us and they say, "Hey, I am going through a tough time right now, but I'm not, I don't think I'm depressed." Or we work heavily with a lot of in churches and different types of churches, and they well, a lot of people come to us and say, "Hey, this I want to be closer to my spirituality, or I want to explore my spirituality, or I want to become closer to my religion," and and all kinds of different things. Or if somebody has tinnitus in their ear, there's all these different things that people come to us for and say, "Hey, I've heard that ketamine has helped so and so, and I want to try it for this." And if it's not something that falls within the scope of treatment or off-label treatment, that can be relevant to it, then unfortunately it can't be safely prescribed for those things. So I wish there was a way that people could come in and say, "Hey, I'm feeling stressed out, and I've done my research and seen the science behind this, and before I go into something else, I want to try this." But if there's not a clinical diagnosis, it's unavailable for them.
Now, what you brushed over, Derek, and there's a part of me that doesn't really just want to leave it there, is this cross between psychedelics, the experience, and spirituality slash religion. There's a lot of kind of, if you have psychedelics and you have the experience, that is akin to a religious one, and potentially can cause people to, whether it's believe in the religious story that they believe in even stronger because of the experience. Or there are people that would say that the psychedelic experience is a way of replacing that, or potentially what people had way back when, that they are then put into a religious context after the fact. What are your thoughts on things like psychedelics and being close to religious experiences?
So, Michael, that's so there's a lot to unpack there, and that could be an entire, we could I could dive into this all day because of what we do in the
Yeah.
spiritual in this what we call spiritual medicine realm, and done this, and not just in uh, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity. It's it's very interesting for what it can do, because for example, the before I'd ever had my first sorry, after before we started Better You, but it was after I'd had my first ketamine therapy session. I was maybe 6 months later. I was having dinner with a friend who a sister was the head of epidemiology at Stanford. So it came up to Stanford to have dinner and just learn more about what's going on with the pandemic, with vaccines, what's going on in the world, and just become more educated. And at that dinner was assistant to Dr. George Greer, was the head of psychedelic medicine and research at Stanford. And I'd shared this is the first time outside of people like my very, very close immediate circle that I had shared that I was suicidal, and ketamine therapy saved my life. It was probably the first time I felt like somebody would understand me or connect to me when I shared that, instead of thinking I was or looking down upon or having judgment about my life or my experience. And I did, and he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And he's like, I want to show you what we do here. And I had the ability to sit in. Well, I mean, at first I had the ability to learn about what they were doing with things like ibogaine for opiate addiction and MDMA for PTSD and an analog of LSD for Alzheimer's. And it opened up my whole world. I was like, how, like, this isn't just the future of medicine. This is the future of mankind, solving really, really big problems and giving people hope. And I was able to kind of be essentially a fly on the wall for these hospice patients, and there was 6 or 7 of them, the end of life care, and they were undergoing ketamine therapy for the first time. And I ended up coming back up there and essentially putting most of my time up there for the next like 6, 7 weeks. And it was some of the most profound experiences I had was just witnessing these people that were coming out of a session that had lost their family members and most of their friends, and they were in extended periods of chronic pain and heavily either like medicated, and it's just very, very, very sad, and lost a lot of hope, and was in a very challenging, dark place, waiting to transition, to move on, or for this chapter to end. And almost every single time after those sessions, that they would come out of it with almost a similar experience, and most of them coming out in tears of joy and saying things like, I am no longer afraid to die. I feel happy with the life that I've lived, and I've never felt this connected to God or to the universe. And it was so beautiful. And I didn't, I hadn't explored the medicine, enough at that time to really understand like how it could be applicable on not just uh, on a neurobiological level or changing our perspective, but really on that spiritual level. And for thousands of years, different types of psychedelics have been used for religious purposes and for ceremonious purposes or coming of age purposes, and getting clarity on things in life and life experiences, and working with different religions. It's so fascinating because you'll see people that become much more connected to their religion or their spirituality and to themselves. And at the same time, you I've come across a lot of people would that are very involved in their communities and or their churches or synagogues or what have you, and they come out of it and they say something or that they no longer feel that, well, while they feel this connection to their higher being or to their God, that they don't feel that what they've been teaching or what they've been practicing is right. And I think it helps people become more spiritual and less religious, if that makes sense.
I mean, the reason why I wanted to ask is very often we realize that science may or may not replace religion eventually. And I think it's still going to be a while before that happens. And religion will always have a place as long as you're a good human being, I guess, whether you're religious or not. It's all about, being a good human. And it's making me question whether or not psychedelics will actually help us understand religion a bit more or replace it. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if it will ever say in a term replace it, but I think for I've seen so many people where it brings them much closer to their spirituality and that connection to themselves, which is beautiful, right? I also understand and am a spiritual person. I am not a religious person. I also understand that every major war and strife and crime and division that exists globally and in our communities is because of different religious beliefs and things that a lot of things that are very archaic and don't make sense that were written thousands of years ago that people live to the T on or believe in stories that were made to make us become better people or stories that give us this perspective, right? But then you have the other side of it where I think extremism or unwavering belief in text for a religion for something, if you just, yeah, like you said, if you look at the science behind it, right? Or people that believe in that Noah's Ark was a real thing, or just there's things that if you believe that if somebody doesn't have the same sexuality as you, that they're going to hell, or
Yeah.
that if you
Yeah.
eat a certain thing if you eat a certain type of meat that that's a sin, you're going to hell, or if like marriage is a construct, and I think that's a beautiful agreement between two people, right? But if you think that if they're just think these are all man-made things, right? That change over time. And so when you have people that like, I'm right, you're wrong, this is my religion, this is why. Like if you're connected to your spirituality and you believe in your your God, and it helps you feel connection and leads this positive change or impact in your life, it's all for it, right? But unfortunately, that there's so many of these different types of religions that people they get carried away and it's very harmful to people on a global scale, and like I love going to like a non-denominational church where there's this beautiful one in West LA where you walk in, there's a picture of Buddha, of Gandhi, of Jesus, of a multitude of other different types of religions and all different kinds of people, and they're just there celebrating life and love and that kind of universal currency of connection and happiness and joy. And I think that is beautiful and fascinating. And I didn't know a place like that existed until a friend brought me into it. And it's like, this is something I can connect to, right? But the churches that I grew up, going to as a kid were very, very shame driven, negative driven, judgment driven, judging yourself. There's a man in the sky pointing at you. And if you're doing these things, you're wrong or they're wrong. And these other people that don't agree with this, they're wrong. Right. And it just creates, like, I grew up in a small little, redneck town in northern Wisconsin where it's not the most educated people and not the brightest. And if there was a different religion in the community that wasn't your cookie cutter Christianity, like that was, or it's funny because there was actually like two different cults that that lived in this small town of 5,000 people that I grew up in. And but instead of being closed-minded as a child, like your parents, you're are educating you, and then community is educating you, and school's educating you. And it's like, if something doesn't fit in, or if something's different, or it doesn't agree or align with your belief system, then it's wrong. And I think that's a very wrong and skewed way to look at the world. And I think that the more that our political leaders, and the more that our spiritual leaders, and the more that any leader that's making any type of decision or impact, I feel like that should be a requirement to hold office, or to lead an organization, is that they should go through some form of psychedelic therapy, guided psychedelic therapy, because it will help them become more true to themselves, and more aligned with themselves. Because a lot of people that I've found, that I've discovered in this journey, and in something that helped me tremendously, is that that you can't you should not be making decisions on behalf of others when you can't even be true to yourself. And most of us aren't. Right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I didn't realize, until I reached my darkest points, that everything I was doing in my life for, up until I was 30-ish years old, that was based on external validation, from my career to my relationships to everything, was based on this external things, right? And when those external things can take a, can everything's fluid, everything changes, right? And when things can turn around, at the end of the day, all you have is yourself. And spirituality is there's the biopsychosocial spheres that we have to have in order, like, happiness is not psychedelics, right? Mental health is not psychedelics. Mental health is also, and happiness isn't religion, it isn't exercise, right? It isn't nutrition, right? But what it is a combination of all of these things, and this recipe and this work that you have to do. And the spirituality piece, I think, is a critical component of it, because you have to, in order to be able to bring more love and light into the world, you have to be able to fill up your own cup first. And I think this goes true for atheism as well. As even if you don't believe in a higher power, or think that nothing happens after you pass away, like, that's another belief, and that's okay. But if they're these types of medicines will help you understand that there is a collective energy, there is a collective consciousness, and there always has been, and there always will be.
No, we've talked a lot at the moment today, tonight, about the idea of like health and mental health, and trying to help people that are struggling or suffering with something that's mental, that psychedelics can be helpful and effective for. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What about pushing the boundaries? What about decision making? What about helping people unlock themselves a little, Derek? I think there might be people out there that are thinking, right, well, maybe I don't necessarily have anything in air quotes wrong with me, or anything that might need help with. But what if I want to push the boundaries? What if I want to achieve my potential as a person? How can psychedelics help with that?
So that is, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that in a somewhat, somewhat politically correct and legal way. Uh, Looking at, what we do is primarily focused on mental health. But if you look at g globally what psychedelic medicines or psychedelic treatments or psychedelic therapies or recreational use of psychedelics, whatever it is, the global influence that these types of things have had on people, whether it's music from from artists from the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, David Bowie, Prince, Beach Boys, right? Some of the biggest, most influential musicians that have shaped uh, culture and every single person can in the country can understand or relate to or has heard these things. These are all have psychedelic medicine or psychedelic uh, type of influence. If you look at regardless of your feelings of this person, if you look at what he's accomplished in his life, as the most successful and wealthiest person in the world, Elon Musk, while he does have some pretty out there views that have come to light, over the last couple of years, his genius and brilliance and what he's pioneered with electric cars, with PayPal, with SpaceX, and these types of things, while being very heavily advocating about psychedelic use. If you look at the tech boom and tech bubble and apps that we use every day and that affect global commerce and the trillions of dollars, these were used. These companies advocate for their employees to microdose psilocybin, and now a lot of these larger tech companies that make a global that have this huge influence are providing ketamine therapy for their employees to help them become better leaders and explore teamwork and connection and problem solving together. So back to the very beginning, Michael, is that when we said, like, what is the definition of psychedelics, right? It's that window into the soul, right? Or the perspective. So I firmly believe that anything in life, whether it's personal, financial, relationships, business, almost anything can be solved with a shift in perspective. And this is what these different types of medicines can do. And that's my very broad answer answer to that. But if you look at what these different things are for, right? If somebody is looking for spiritual exploration and they're like, I want to go because these are all things that can, or they're looking for uh, broadening their horizon or neural enhancement or neural protection or expanding their brains. The science behind ketamine therapy or mushrooms, psilocybin, LSD. These are all very powerful things that I believe you should have something, a shaman or somebody that's very experienced or a clinician to help guide you through this journey because your sense of time and space can be distorted, which can be scary for people if you're not ready for that journey or that ride yet. But the science behind all three of these things of what it does to our brain and kind of this, imagine it as this fertilizer for the brain. So you're sparking new connections, you're making parts of your brain connect to each other that normally don't communicate, normally don't speak. And when we can do these things responsibly and ethically and in a safe setting and safe environment, if if the war on drugs never happened, or the war on psychedelics particularly, if that never happened, we would be in a much, much, much different world right now. If if the United States wasn't so overprescribed and overdiagnosed benzos and antidepressants, where we're numbing things and we're not feeling darkness. We're not feeling sadness. We're also not feeling happiness. We're also not feeling remorse. And people do terrible things, as opposed to the opposite, where people, would be feeling more connection and more connection to the universe, more connection to themselves. Like nobody's out there shooting, or killing innocent animals, or killing people because of their different belief systems or structures, because they feel a connection to other people. They do it because they're so disconnected from themselves. Like one of the most fascinating things that it was a big news headline, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, and it was a white supremacist with swastikas tattooed all over himself, and he underwent psychedelic therapy treatment, and immediately I was like, I have been living this terrible life filled with hate, that, like, he's like, I need help escaping this community that I've become a big part of, because I don't believe in any of these things. Like none of these things are true, and this is like this very, very toxic and terrible programming. And if people, outside of mental health, right? If people can find some more connection to themselves, we would be in a much different world. And people do that, without psychedelics. And there's things outside of psychedelic medicine. You can do holotropic breath work and induce a psychedelic experience. You can do transcendental meditation, and it takes a lot of practice, but you can get to a psychedelic state from that, right? So it's really about changing our perspective, and I'm all for anybody that wants to do these things for uh, expanding their own potential and finding purpose in life. I wish we could prescribe this for people, that every single person that they're going into a university, like like one of the number one things. I was talking to a guy that owns this company, Intuit, that is one of the largest educational global schools around the world. And he said the number one thing that people come in for, to the therapist or psychiatrist for, is that the stress and anxiety around choosing their major. Right? Nobody knows what they want to do when they're that age. They have ideas,
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
things they've researched, right? Like I had no idea I was going to do the last three different things I did with my life, right? And that's okay, right? But we have this programming that, like, we hit a certain age and we have to make a decision then, and because you're planning for your future, right? And you have to find a skill set where that makes you happy and adds value to the world. But it's an unrealistic expectation to give these kids, and say, hey, well, you'll make money doing this, or you'll be happy doing this. Like, I think here, lay out some options and give, what is that? It's the Japanese I can't remember the name. I'm blanking on it, but it's three circles, right? Find what you're good at, find what makes you happy, find this, right? And do that exercise, and now come into it and do a psychedelic therapy session, trying to explore that answer, right? And I think that, like, if we could make that a standard going into education, I think we'd have people that are a lot more successful and a lot happier with their career choices and with their jobs. So the impact that it can make on a global scale very, very quickly, with things like, if you're in Colorado or Oregon, you can legally you can legally get psychedelic therapy. You can legally get psilocybin. And in the rest of the country, you can legally, in a safe, controlled, or even at-home environment, get ketamine therapy and access to a legal, uh, spiritual or personal or thought expansion, whatever it is that you're going in for, as long as you have some sort of mental illness, or I do not like using that term. If you're going through something, and other treatments haven't been effective for you, like, there is access to these things, right? But then it's only after you are prescribed, you're diagnosed with something. But then, once you get through working on those core things, the beauty of this is like, so many times patients will say, I came into this because I was had chronic stress at work and I've been losing my mind and it's been going on for too long and I don't know what to do. Nothing's helping. And then a month later, after a couple of sessions, they're talking to their integration coach or therapist, they'll say, I never came into this with the intention of quitting drinking alcohol or quitting smoking cigarettes, but I did because I realized my relationship with these things is terrible and it's causing nothing but harm to me and my life and my loved ones. And I also realized like I'm kind of an asshole or I'm bringing a lot of this unnecessary stress and energy into my relationships or to my children. And like, what am I doing? And so it allowed me to change all of these things that I never A, acknowledged or understood that were there, or B, I didn't have the intention of doing it, right? But it gives you this clarity. And yeah, and like we touched on before is the finding purpose and spiritual exploration and like all the different things that the people can use this for. And some of the most incredible arts, music and films and sculptures, have this influence. I mean, look at all of the Disney movies, the children's movies, of the ones that at least I grew up on in the late '80s, early '90s. Fantasia, Beauty and the Beast, like Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, like all of these have uh, very heavily psychedelic influence. All the kids show TV shows back then, every Nickelodeon show, Ren and Stimpy, like all these things. You look at these things when you're older, and you're like, and have gone through psychedelic experiences, and you're like, SpongeBob SquarePants, right? All of these things are clearly have a significant influence of things that aren't there without some sort of external push or catalyst, right? And this medicine or these different types of therapies or treatments, they're not by any means a cure-all for anything, right? But what they are is a catalyst for us to be able to explore new thought patterns or give us the motivation and clarity to become better people. But I mean, you still got to do the work, but it's definitely a shortcut.
I wonder what your thoughts would be on, you mentioned like people making better decisions and being clearer, and actually quite like the smoking and alcohol analogy, because some people might just sit there and think it just doesn't simply make sense anymore to keep doing these things. I don't understand why I ever started. And sometimes it is like shifting perspective, as you said. But what do you think would stop happening or no longer be a thing if people that are 16, 18, they went through psychedelic experiences before they, let's say, choose their major or went to college slash university or decided on their first job? Because I'm picturing some industries would almost completely dissolve if that happened.
Oh, what 1000%. That's a great a great perspective, a great statement because I have seen personally, and because I grew up in a town, like I said, of I don't know, 5,000-ish people. We've now treated more people than the town that I grew up in. And I think that was probably the first time that I felt like I was really, really making a difference. And after the first patient that I connected with, that I was just walking down the street or sorry, I was at a hotel rooftop and this person came up to me and I'm wearing a shirt and she goes, "Better you, save my fucking life." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And she, shared her story and her journey and what she was doing prior and how she become suicidal and now her career trajectory, life had changed and is on this whole different, other beautiful, brilliant path. And entire industries, like you said. So I mean, we have people that work for. I mean, we have people that had gone through their own transformation with psychedelic medicine, their own perspective and finding purpose, and they've left their careers or their callings and came to work for us. And somebody on my team that she's in her mid 50s and went back to school to become a therapist and after healing her own trauma. And And the people that, we get up and we do things every day for a paycheck, or we get up and do things every day, to make ends meet, or we get up and do things every day because we have to, right? But that choice of what we do, right? And that choice of there's people out there that, right now are in a bulldozer going through the rainforest, killing animals that are almost endangered, right? There's people right now that are working in factory farm slaughterhouses for McDonald's, right? Because they have to, right? But there's there's things, a lot of things happening that are very, very negative, that people like, that's their profession. There's, if you're working for an oil company, and what this is doing to our environments and killing the world. You're working, even working actually, I don't know if I want to get into the pharmaceutical world, but there's things that we get up and do every day to make ends meet because we have to, right? But there's also our moral conscious, and our moral, our collective conscious, and our moral compass, that is, it's our choice, right? We have to make ends meet, but can we do it in a way that isn't causing harm to our communities, to our families, to our friends? It's going to make this world a little bit better, instead of making it worse. And I love what you said, is like, there's entire industries that wouldn't exist if people felt, and leadership at different, industries that I believe would make, or I would hope that would make major changes, if not leave their industries, or help influence change in their industries, if they understood, it's like, had that connection and cared about the detriments to society that they're doing.
I would completely agree with that. And I think the whole world would be better if we're able to think clearly and, as you said, let go of the baggage of the past. And I'd be really keen for people listening to get involved, maybe try the work that you're up to at Better You. So how can people find out about you, Derek, and Better You, and how can people get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best thing that you can do, or the best way to find us, is on our website. So it's Better You Care, just the letter U. So betteryoucare.com. Our social media handles are all at Better You Care. And that's the easiest way to reach us. Either send a message from social media channels, or go on the site and fill out an intake, or give us a call. The best way to get involved is if you know show up, and this is how I want you to get involved. I want you to try something that's going to feel silly if you've never done it before, but I want you to wake up for the next 7 days, and the first thing you do is look in the mirror, and write down a list of I don't know, 30 to 40 positive affirmations, or a contract with yourself, a belief system about yourself, and wake up every day, and before you do anything, go to the bathroom mirror and start saying these positive affirmations to yourself, because that is something that really, really, really helped me change the trajectory of my life and my belief system. So, whether or not you're ready to explore psychedelic therapy, and we don't do, we do talk therapy as well. We're expanding into different programs like sexual health, all types of different things. And outside of just talk therapy and psychedelic therapy, and veteran reintegration programs, et cetera. But something, my mission is to, and our mission is to help people become the best versions of themselves. And a mentor that helped me a long time ago asked me, he goes, "What's the first thing that you tell yourself every day?" And I said, I don't know. And then I thought about it, and he goes, "Yeah, that's a problem." And he gave me his list, or his contract, of the first kind of 10 minutes of how he starts his day, of what he tells himself, his agreements with himself, his positive affirmations, his beliefs about himself, and repeats those every day. And I tried it at first and felt really silly and like woo-woo science. And then I started doing it and stuck with it, and it completely changed my life. So anybody would like some assistance with that, and I'm happy to share my core system that I repeat to myself every day that's helped me. So send me a message on through our website at betteryoucare.com or through social media channels. It's Derek Duchesne or at Derek DEREK DDD on some platforms, and send me a message and say, hey, heard this podcast and I'm interested in starting my day like this, and I'll send you a message with my contract that's helped me, and hopefully it will help you too.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Eric, thanks so much for joining me. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate you.